Deputy Prime Minister of Tajikistan, distinguished representatives of intergovernmental organizations, United Nations agencies, international organizations, and stakeholder groups. I am pleased to welcome you all to the 6th session of the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction under the overall theme, Resilience Dividend Towards Sustainable and Inclusive Societies. I'm honored to serve as your co-chair today with the representative of the host country, Mr. Manuel Bessler, Deputy Director General, Head of Humanitarian Aid Department, and Head of the Swiss Humanitarian Aid Unit. I am also honored to welcome our speakers at this session, Mr. Petri Talas, Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization, Ms. Laura Tuck, Vice President for Sustainable Development of the World Bank, Ms. Fekitomoaloa Utoikamanu, UN Under-Secretary General and High Representative for the Least Developed Countries, Landlocked Developed Countries, and Small Island Developing States, and Ms. Shaila Shahid, Representative of UNDRR Stakeholder Engagement Mechanism. Over the past 2 days, a number of very important preparatory events took place. The meeting of the Small Island Developing States, the 4th World Reconstruction Conference, the 2nd Multi-Hazard Early Warning Conference, Stakeholder Forum, the Science and Policy Forum, and a number of regional consultations. In a moment, we will hear from our distinguished speakers on some of the highlights from these events. The Sendai Framework has expanded the constituency for disaster risk reduction across all of society, and the program of this global platform reflect this diversity and inclusiveness. Over the next 3 days, we expect nearly 3,500 participants from a diverse range of sectors, groups, and stakeholders. I look forward to the innovative idea and new approaches that will emerge from such an enthusiastic group of people gathered here today. Allow me to once again welcome you all. I would now like to give the floor to my co-chair, Mr. Manuel Bessler, Deputy Director General, Head of Humanitarian Aid Department, and Head of the Swiss Humanitarian Aid Unit, who will speak on behalf of the host country. Mr. Bessler.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente, Monsieur le Premier ministre adjoint, Mesdames, Messieurs les ministres, Excellences, Mesdames, Messieurs les délégués, chers amis, aussi de la part de la Suisse, une chaleureuse bienvenue ici à Genève. Je suis très content de vous accueillir ici et avec mon co-chair, d'ouvrir cette conférence si importante. Vous êtes venus des 4 points du monde et je tiens à vous remercier au nom du gouvernement suisse. Je suis bien informé, c'est plus que 4000 personnes ici de plus de 150 pays sont inscrits. Ce sont là des chiffres impressionnants. C'est un grand honneur pour la Suisse de vous recevoir dans ce cadre, dans cette conférence si importante. Nous sommes particulièrement heureux de vous accueillir ici à Genève, une ville qui nourrit depuis longtemps une culture de dialogue, du partage et de l'initiative commune. Comptant sur son sol de nombreuses organisations internationales dont l'objectif est de réduire les risques et de renforcer la résilience. Genève est le pôle important international en matière de réduction des risques de catastrophes. Je constate que la volonté politique d'avancer dans ce domaine se renforce ici même, comme la démontre notamment votre participation. Aujourd'hui, nous nous retrouvons pour la 5e fois à Genève depuis la première édition en 2007 de la plateforme mondiale. les progrès accomplis depuis sont considérables. Nous avons institué un nouveau cadre mondial. La notion de résilience est maintenant reconnue comme le moteur de la réduction durable des risques. La Suisse poursuit sa mobilisation en faveur de ce processus et contribue ainsi à la résiliation des objectifs du cadre d'action de Sendai et des objectifs de développement durable. Toutefois, le chemin à parcourir est encore long d'ici à 2030. Certes, on observe de nombreux développements et des initiatives positives, comme par exemple la campagne pour les villes résilientes. Mais les pertes provoquées par les catastrophes augmentent toujours. Et le changement climatique n'est pas la seule cause de ce phénomène. La complexité et l'interconnexion croissante des sociétés vont de pair avec une exposition accrue au risque. La pression démographique pousse toujours davantage de personnes à vivre dans les environs défavorables. Messieurs et mesdames, investir dans la résilience porte ses fruits. Bien connaître les risques, avoir conscience des enjeux climatiques et être bien préparé avant d'agir n'est pas un luxe, mais une condition sine qua non d'un développement durable et équitable. Bien sûr, l'investir dans la résilience a aussi un prix, mais les bénéfices et les effets positifs prévalent de manière évidente. L'expertise de la Suisse en témoigne. Si les êtres humains ont pu s'installer dans les régions alpines peu hospitalières, c'est uniquement grâce à une culture unique de la prudence, de la prévention et de la préparation. Aujourd'hui, nous tirons profit de ces investissements. La résilience paye. Elle constitue un devoir face aux générations futures. Et effectivement, mesdames et messieurs, partout dans le monde, les jeunes se mobilisent pour le climat et appellent à l'action. Et ils ont une bonne raison de le faire. C'est l'avenir, c'est leur avenir que nous sommes en train de modeler. Et nous devrions entendre cet appel et l'interpréter comme une initiative au changement qui peut nous aider à accélérer notre marche vers un monde durable et résilient. Puissions notre inspiration dans ce mouvement et développons des idées non conventionnelles pour réduire les risques. Enfin, faisons preuve d'ouverture et discutons de manière honnête et constructive. Qu'avons-nous réalisé ensemble? Quelles sont les difficultés rencontrées? Sur quel aspect devons-nous avancer plus vite? Quelles sont les solutions novatrices prometteuses? Cette plateforme qu'on ouvre aujourd'hui, cette plateforme mondiale, nous offre une excellente occasion d'évaluer les progrès réalisés depuis notre dernière rencontre au Mexique il y a 2 ans. Dans cet esprit, chers amis, mesdames et messieurs, je vous souhaite, au nom du gouvernement suisse, une conférence riche, animée et fructueuse. Merci beaucoup.
I thank Mr. Bessler for his welcome remarks. We will now hear from our distinguished speakers who will present key highlights and outcomes from selected preparatory day events. I now give the floor to our next speaker, Mr. Petri Talas, Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization. So you have the floor.
So, dear colleague Mami, dear colleagues around the table, dear participants of the meeting, it's a pleasure to address you here indoors. From WMO's side, we are a little bit sorry for the weather outside. It has been very chilly, rainy, and now very windy. But here indoors, you are very well protected from those events. As the previous speaker said, climate change is already with us today. We have seen 1 degree warming of the planet, and we have also changed the water vapor content of the atmosphere, and we have highest concentration of carbon dioxide in 3 million years today. We have started seeing growing amount of disasters, flooding, drought, more intense tropical storms, and the costs of disasters have been rapidly growing. And there was a recent IPCC report published in October demonstrating what would be the pathway to 1.5 degree warming, which would be the best solution for the welfare of the mankind. The upper limit of Paris Agreement is 2 degrees, and so far the pledges of the countries, they are indicating about 3 degree warming, and if we don't do anything, there's a chance to reach even 5 degrees by the end of this century, with dramatically larger amount of disasters. And we have to, besides climate mitigation, we have to adapt to climate change, and a very powerful way to adapt to climate change is to invest in early warning services. WMO was just hosting a conference on Monday and Tuesday this week on multi-hazard early warning services, and we also agreed a common statement as an outcome of that meeting, which is stating that we have to invest more in development of early warning services. We have about 100 countries that don't have proper multi-hazard early warning services, and we have too few countries who are able to deal with impact-based forecasting. And we were just facing the Idai cyclone that was hitting Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. The forecast was done in a proper way, but there were difficulties in understanding what is going to be the impact, and also the telecommunication systems were broken, and therefore the evacuation means and all the both economic and human losses were much larger than in the case that we would have understood the impact of it, and we would have been able to deliver the message, and the message would have been heard. So we have a challenge there. And from WMO's perspective, we see that the engine of DRR are the early warning services. This DRR is like a car, and our expertise represents the engine of that. 91% of the disasters, they are related to weather and water issues that we are representing. We will deliver this message to the WMO Congress, which will meet here during the first 2 weeks of June. We are also going to deal the outcomes of our multi-hazard conference, and also this platform at the Global Adaptation Commission meeting, which will meet next week in Berlin, led by Ban Ki-moon. And also we are going to have a climate summit of Secretary General Guterres in New York for the heads of state, and the outcomes of these 2 events will be also handled there. And we have also already agreed with the government of Chile that the COP25 will also be one of the players in the next steps of those events. So once again, welcome also on behalf of WMO, and thanks for those who participated in the multi-hazard early warning service conferences, both from the meteorological services. We had also 19 international organizations present there, and also several finance and donor organizations. Thanks for your participation, and thanks for your great outcome of the conference. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Talas for his remarks. I will now give the floor to our next speaker, Ms. Laura Tuck, Vice President for Sustainable Development of the World Bank. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mami, and thank you, Manuel. We really appreciate both UNDRR and Switzerland's longstanding partnership and leadership on disaster risk reduction. Back in 2015, we all committed to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and we pledged to ensure no one will be left behind and to endeavor to reach the furthest behind first in our efforts to reduce poverty. And that same year, in the Sendai framework, we committed to the principle that disaster risk reduction should be an all-of-society effort that empowers and pays special attention to those who are disproportionately affected by disasters. So here we are, 4 years later. We have made a lot of progress, but we have not yet achieved those objectives. And at times, it feels like our job is getting harder and harder. Over the course of 2018 and 2019, science not only started speaking to us more loudly, but it started screaming. You just heard from Petteri about the state of the planet. The IPCC report he referred to, the US climate assessment, the Stockholm Resilience Center report on tipping points, the WMO State of Global Climate report that Petteri just put out, among many others. And that told us that the situation is worse than we thought now, and worse even at 1.5 degrees, and as you just heard, that we're likely to go beyond that with obvious impacts on storms and floods and droughts and sea levels and everything you all know. But it's not just about climate. We saw last week the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity put out a report that said our biosphere is also deteriorating rapidly and significantly from overuse and from pollution. Topsoil for food production is being lost 10 to 40 times faster than it's being replenished. Insects that pollinate our crops are being threatened with extinction. As oceans become warmer, the fisheries that feed 3.1 billion people are being depleted. So my very first point is that we cannot achieve the goals we set for ourselves in 2015 if we don't focus first on building a healthy planet. And this is a precondition if we want to build healthy societies and healthy economies. Which brings me to my second point, which is healthy societies need to be inclusive and resilient. And this, of course, has been the focus of the World Reconstruction Conference, which we have supported with the UN and EU partners over the last couple days. We know that vulnerable and marginalized people get hit harder by disasters. They live, as you've heard, and you know, in more vulnerable places, hillsides, floodplains, and they are twice as likely to live in fragile dwellings. The share of wealth lost by poor people is 2 to 3 times that of those who are better off, mostly because of the nature and the susceptibility of their assets and their livelihoods. So after a disaster, these groups can be left worse off because they're too frequently left out of the recovery process. Just as an example, on the eastern coast of Sri Lanka, a lack of understanding of traditional matrilineal relationships on land ownership after the tsunami meant that male household members were registered as homeowners instead of women. And when the databases were then linked to housing reconstruction cash support programs, women missed out on this recovery support. So inclusive solutions are not yet as widespread as they need to be, and they are not yet mainstreamed. We have to do a lot more research on this agenda: research, analytics, operations, and investments. But the solutions are out there, and the sessions we've had over the last couple days at the World Reconstruction Conference this week highlighted some interesting new directions. So for example, in Kerala, after the 2019 floods, the government then did the first post-disaster needs assessment that included community stakeholders, first for Kerala. And these stakeholders then helped develop differentiated strategies to address the needs and the priorities of all the different vulnerable groups. And they made recommendations for the specific needs related to things like gender and culture. So we at the World Bank are happy to work with countries to help them go further to deepen their inclusion efforts in other areas like disability. Back in July, we announced that by 2020, all World Bank projects that finance public facilities in post-disaster reconstruction would be disability inclusive. So just as an example, we're working with the government of India to finance the construction of about 1,000 multipurpose cyclone shelters along the entire coastline, and all of them will have disability-friendly wheelchair ramps giving them access to the lowermost habitable floor. They will have separate facilities for men and for women and sick rooms for the sick that are separate. So all of this is to say the SDGs, the Sendai goals, and the Paris Agreement set forth an incredible ambition that I think we all share. The World Bank will be working on the basis that these agendas are fundamentally interconnected because the goals of sustainability, resilience, and inclusion are themselves fundamentally interconnected. So we need integrated solutions that tackle planetary health, reduce risk in every single sector, and empower those typically left out of the recovery and the development process. And that means we need to listen more and talk less. And with that, I will stop talking and enjoy listening to the rest of the conversation today. Thank you.
I thank Ms. Tuck for her remarks. I now give the floor to Ms. Fikitamoloa Utoikamanu, UN Undersecretary General and High Representative for the least developed countries, landlocked developed countries, and small island developing states. You have the floor, Madam.
Distinguished co-chairs, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a pleasure to be here at this welcome session of the 6th Global Platform on Disaster Risk Reduction and to share with you the key outcomes of the 4th meeting of the Small Island States Resilience Initiative Practitioners Network, which was held on the 12th and 13th of May. The meeting was jointly organized by the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, the World Meteorological Organization, and the UN Office of the High Representative for the Least Developed Countries, Landlocked Developing Countries, and Small Island Developing States, and funded by the European Commission through the ACP-EU Natural Disaster Risk Reduction Program managed by GFDRR. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, by way of background, SISRI is an initiative of the Global Facility for the Disaster Reduction and Recovery managed by the World Bank and works with small island states to reduce climate and disaster risks to their populations, assets, ecosystems, and economies. It was launched in 2014 as a response to small island states' call for more adequate, predictable, and effective flows of finance from the international community through technical assistance, implementation support, knowledge sharing, innovation, and partnerships. One of the main pillars of this initiative is to strengthen a community of practice for small island states through the SISRI Practitioners Network. For this meeting, more than 60 development practitioners from 29 small island developing states came together under the theme, Bringing Resilience to Scale in Small Island Developing States. Located in some of the most disaster-prone regions in the world, SIDS are among the most vulnerable to natural hazards and the impact of climate change. Eager to share best practice and lessons learned for enhancing climate and disaster-resilient development, participants came together with a view to exchanging experience and good practices developed by small island states to make development climate and disaster resilient, facilitating peer-to-peer learning to support effective design and implementation of climate and disaster resilient investments and policy interventions, and further strengthening the community of practice between small island states practitioners. Through presentations and lively discussions, the participants shared national and regional experience and solutions to important challenges, including how to select high-impact interventions and investments when there are many national, sectoral, and cross-sectoral priorities. Participants also considered evidence-based decision-making tools such as Sao Tome and Principe's Spatial Risk Information and the Pacific Risk Information System, which are enabling SIDS to better understand and analyze their respective climate and disaster risk profiles, thus helping guide their resilience planning and investments. They also presented and discussed a range of issues, from the prioritization of climate and disaster resilient activities to be scaled up, to mainstreaming resilience in public financial management and key areas, sectors such as built environment, urban transport and other infrastructure, and coastal management. Other key areas of the discussion included the role of the private sector through the Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator and the importance of community-led partnerships and gender-responsive approaches to building resilience. The latter generated a great deal of discussion on vulnerability, marginalization, and equal opportunities in line with the theme of this year's global platform, the Resilience Dividend towards Sustainable and Inclusive Societies. Oxfam's country director in the Solomon Islands, in her excellent intervention, stressed the importance of women's leadership in disaster risk reduction. Across the board, the SIDS acknowledge that the twin challenges of a changing climate and intensifying disaster risk would not be easy to overcome. Yet, there was also consensus that by exchanging experience, ideas, and lessons learned from efforts already underway, a resilient future for the SIDS would be much more achievable. The potential for replication of some of the solutions shared led participants to call for more frequent formalized peer-to-peer learning opportunities and for support to South-South visit exchanges. These very important outcomes are intended to feed into the discussions here at the global platform, as well as other meetings held later this year in the context of the United Nations General Assembly. These meetings included the Secretary General's Climate Action Summit, the SDG Summit, a high-level dialogue on financing for development, and last but not least, the high-level midterm review of the Samoa pathway. My office, OHR LLS, remains highly committed to ensuring that these matters are given the prominence they deserve in the context of these important meetings and as we move forward in support of more climate and disaster resilient development in small island developing states. Thank you very much.
I thank Ms. Utoi Kamanu for her remarks. I now give the floor to our last speaker, Ms. Shaila Shahid, who is speaking on behalf of the UNDRR Stakeholder Engagement Mechanism in this session. You have the floor, Madam.
Thank you, Madam. Honorable Special Representative of UN Secretary General, Ms. Mami Majituri, distinguished panelists, Your Excellency, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I'm immensely honored and privileged to represent the UNDRR Stakeholder Engagement Mechanism, Global Civil Society, Science and Policy Forum, and local community, including UN Women's Major Group in this platform. I'm also carrying the messages from a very local coastal community from Bangladesh named Krishokeshwar Farmers Voice. Dear delegates, you know that a changing climate and rapidly growing exposure to disaster risk presents the world with an unprecedented challenge. Disasters causing far-reaching economic and structural disruption and have long-term social, ecological, and psychological impacts. Even recurring small-scale and slow-onset disasters predominantly affecting communities and households and continue a high percentage of all sorts of losses. Even when we all are here, as the spirit of Sendai Framework on DRR and SDGs agenda is leaving no one behind, seas of people globally are being excluded, remain vulnerable, unseen, and unheard of. Dear Chair, the extent to which the vital UN agreements emerging from Sendai, Paris, and Addis Ababa having impact in the real world will be determined by their practical implementation in our communities and daily lives. We need to address systematic and cascading risks to achieve mutual support and risk reduction across Sendai Framework, Paris Agreement, and SDGs. In doing so, we need to recognize that our diverse identities and resources serve to strengthen our unity and dignity, and that full inclusion, particularly of those disproportionately affected by disasters and those who have been marginalized, are included in all stages of disaster decision-making. We are concerned that resilience is not conceptualized or defined consistently across the three agreements that we are having in the world today, and effort is needed to resolve those inconsistencies. Ensuring the resilience of the global financial system should not be achieved at the cost of degrading economies of some of the countries and many local communities. Despite its apparent universal appeal, there is limited agreement about its meaning, and the concept needs considerable work on definition and indicators of resilience. Therefore, we strongly recommend that resilience be redefined by underpinning it with the people's priorities, development justice, reducing the inequalities, and to ensure just transition for all. Unless we redefine resilience on those critical considerations, defending environment and achieving sustainability will be an exercise of futility. Dear Chair, we all are aware that civil society organizations have continued to play a critical role in upholding the commitments, serve as custodians of people-based development, and build community resilience. Hence, the Sendai stakeholder engagement mechanism, along with other key actors like Science and Policy Forum, private actors, and with the local community, we would be continuing to work to support the valuable commitments that made in Sendai. We consider ourselves protagonists and active participants in the process of advancing DRR. We urge that this takes the forms of partnership and collective strategic initiatives to achieve the SFDRR. Therefore, we call on state parties, donors, NGOs, local governments, private sector, and the local community to work together for, firstly, in-depth interdisciplinary analysis of risk interdependencies. In this context, the conceptualization, identification, and understanding of risk demands an interdisciplinary, integrated approach and collaboration between science and policy, local knowledge, as well as traditional practices of the local community. Secondly, comprehensive disaster loss data should be utilized to produce valuable risk information for decision-making authorities, including local community as a stakeholder, not only as a beneficiary. The value of standardized data and disaggregated data are one of the keys to achieve loss estimation, risk assessment, and ultimately cost benefits for hazards and loss and damage data. We are also aware that in March 2018, UNDRR made available the Sendai Monitor, an online tool designed to collect disaster data from member states according to the 38 indicators of Sendai framework. But today, only a few countries had either been validated data available or was ready for validation. So action must be taken in order to improve compliance, capacity building support, and enable a reliable monitoring assessment in the reporting process, maintaining data standard, and processing metadata from all levels. Fourthly, we see prevention as one of the keys to disaster risk reduction. Climate change and the loss of biodiversity must be halted. The loss of forests, wetlands, and coastal areas with mangroves and coral reefs have direct implications for risk. They weaken the nature's ability to withstand extreme weather events. We need to strengthen the protection of ecosystems and more clearly see the services they provide to us. Finally, the private sector and business entities have emerged as an essential partners to reduce economic and human losses caused every year by disasters. The private sector support is desirable for the predicted increased economic exposure due to climate change variability, uncontrolled urbanization, environmental degradation that will factor more disasters in the future, threatening the development gains and also putting people in risk. We call on taking immediate steps for increasing the awareness, insurance literacy, and capacities of medium, small enterprises to be able to comprehensively prepare for and respond to disaster events, and ideally interlink them with the development of national and local disaster risk reduction strategies, national adaptation plans, and financing mechanisms. Moreover, we believe that a consistent gender perspective should be applied when it comes to both the understanding of risk factors and concrete action. Women's participation and leadership is critical in designing and implementing disaster risk reduction programs at all levels. We must likewise tap the unique contribution to disaster resilience of different groups in our society: women, children, the elderly, people living with disabilities, indigenous community, as we address their specific vulnerabilities. Above all, from the stakeholder engagement mechanism, we envisage for inclusive and cross-sectoral multi-stakeholder collaboration at all stages of the humanitarian and development endeavor. It is critical to ensure that those most affected by disasters are given equal voice at all stages of risk-informed development, and it will bring the strength and wisdom of our diverse perspectives and roles to the fore, and it would counteract the group-based hostilities currently in the ascendant. Dear Chair and the distinguished delegates, we are constantly having to deal with evolving threats, evolving challenges, evolving risks, and that means we need to bring creative thinking and innovation with our devotion and commitment, and that is very important, that we work with devotion. It is desperately important that we break through the cynic cycle and deny our barrier and must embrace the accelerated action. Only together we can start the course towards a new world in respect, in unity, and solidarity. If we miss the chance, no one will win, and the solutions lies in our collective efforts only. Before finishing, I would again like to call upon to all here who are present here today that we should leaving behind all the ego, and I call on parties, donors, NGOs, local government, local people, science and policy forum, and private sector. Let's join our hands together to the struggle of a child at the furthest corner of the globe and in the world to have a happy life in a healthy planet Earth. And let's work together to build a real community resilience. Thank you, dear Chair, and thank you, dear delegates, and all the participants.
I thank Ms. Shaid for her remarks. I would now like to give the floor back to my co-chair, Mr. Bessler, for his concluding remarks. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much indeed to the members on the panel. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, you see how much information, how many facts, figures, observations are available, and were gathered in the run-up for this conference. It's impressive, and it's also encouraging. And it's clearly also a mandate for us to make out of these days the best we can, and to have an actionable follow-up. Early warning, timely and risk-informed reconstruction following a disaster, and the involvement of all stakeholders, as it was outlined just in the last intervention, in all phases of the risk management cycle are key to building resilient society. This should be common sense, actually, but unfortunately, we are quite far away from this. Even in my country, it needed a lot of experience, of tragic experience, to come to this conclusion. After only a lot of devastating floods, after avalanches, actually, we realized to act as a catalyst for investing more in people-centered warning and alert systems that extensively promotes risk-informed development and reconstruction. Building resilience is everybody's business. We need all stakeholders on board to reach out to common goals. I'm therefore confident that this year's global platform will achieve this objective. A multi-stakeholder conference that needs or that lends voices to civil society, to international organizations, to national and regional stakeholders, as well as, of course, to the private sector and academia. All these actors have to address the challenges of our time. I want to extend a warm thank you to all those who were involved in the preparation of this important conference, be it the team from UNDRR, be it the team from Switzerland. And it's on us to make progress on these difficult and challenging tasks, but also to have always in our vision the future of coming generations to which we have the responsibility to act. Thank you very much.
I thank my co-chair, Mr. Bessler, for his concluding remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, the global platform will highlight not only the obvious benefits that flow from disaster risk reduction in terms of saving lives and protecting livelihoods, but also the greater contribution that disaster risk reduction can make to the achieving of the SDGs and action on climate change. These two issues are, as all the speakers today have mentioned, high on the agenda, and they will be on the agenda for the two ministerial roundtables which will take place today and tomorrow. As you may know, the outcome of the global platform is the chair's summary, which will capture the key recommendations of the 3 days for accelerating progress on implementing the Sendai framework. The chair's summary will be key in offering guidance on how we can ensure that the 2020 deadline for national and local strategies for disaster risk reduction is met, and that those strategies are inclusive, people-centered, and gender-sensitive. The chair's summary will be communicated to the President of the United Nations Economic and Social Council as a contribution to upcoming debates of the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. It will also inform the discussions at the UN Climate Summit and the COP later this year. So, ladies and gentlemen, before closing this session, I would like to invite all participants to remain seated for the next session, which is the High-Level Dialogue 1, Progress in Implementing the Sendai Framework, Global and Regional Perspectives, which will start in the same room in a few minutes. We now conclude the welcome session. Thank you very much.